Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today. This is Victoria English. I'm the head coach at Alcohol Free Lifestyle. I'm excited for this episode. I'm interviewing a Project 90 graduate, a man who went through our 90-day program and achieved that very important 90-day mark and decided to move on into beyond 90 to get to really see what life is like on the other side of alcohol. Jeremy Wilson is joining me today. Jeremy is 41 years old. He is from Indiana, now lives in California. He's a financial controller and a father, husband who loves the outdoors, loves being with his family. And Jeremy has been an outstanding member of our community. You know, our community is curated. That's why there's not a click here to join. We work with a specific type of individual, someone who is holding it together on the outside. Things look all right, even though it can sometimes feel like that pulling a thread on a sweater and there's some fraying. They have a great mindset for success. They're driven, goal-oriented. But there's another thing that we are looking for when we meet people on these discovery calls. And that is, are they coachable? Is this highly successful person able to come in with a mindset of curiosity? Let's see what's possible here. Are they able to say to themselves, wow, I know a lot about a lot of things. However, my attempts to live alcohol-free and feel free haven't worked out in my favor. Jeremy is one of the most coachable members I've had in a while. And so today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Jeremy's journey and what made Project 90 so successful. Jeremy was alcohol-free for over 3 years. He did it on his own. So this is about a lone wolf becoming coachable. Jeremy, thanks for joining us. Yes.
Yeah, good to be here.
Before we get
Thanks for having
started, you guys, Jeremy is also a musician. And I'm going to look him up on YouTube later. His former band is called Calafia. He's a huge fish fan. So for any of you fish fans out there, I know that is a whole lifestyle movement thing. So if you're one of those, Jeremy's one of you. So yes, he's got a really interesting story. Jeremy, let's start with start at the beginning. Talk a little bit about, what prompted you to become alcohol-free for 3.5 years?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing was the pendulum had swung from what I viewed alcohol as being more of a net positive effect on my life to definitely going down the road of being a net negative. And I have to give credit to my wife through a lot of this. She was the impetus and a lot of the encouragement when I made that choice for the first time to really give it up. And my 2 young boys too. It's like having a family and having all of that responsibility and needing to be a good example for them and be the husband and father that I needed to be. I think that was the kick in the pants that finally got me to lock in and really commit that first time. And like you referred to earlier, that was really me just kind of filling my head with as much knowledge as I could and reading what I could and connecting with groups online and kind of reading what had been successful for them and getting encouragement that way. But but as you said, I really was on my own. It's not like I had a support group that I was checking in with daily or anything like that. So yeah, I was able to sustain that for a while. And then, I think it's a fairly common story, thought, well, maybe I can introduce this back into my life and have it be different this time. And unfortunately, it was not.
So what I'm hearing you say is you educated yourself. I understand that you read books like This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. She is the one who actually certified me. So shout out to Annie. And was it Quit Alcohol the Easy Way? Things like that. Alan Carr. Yep.
Yeah. Alan Carr.
So, and that's cool because I did the same thing, actually. I would listen to all these podcasts and everything, and I knew a lot, and it was helpful. What I lacked was the ability to really, really integrate it and make it part of who I am. Would you say that was a similar experience for you?
I think so, because throughout those, well, I should back up one step. So I think part of I shouldn't say I think, I know that part of my initial journey down this road, we had just moved. So I lived in California for 12 years, and we had just moved to Seattle. And that was a big upheaval, leaving this place that I loved and moving to a new place with my family. Now there was, my wife's side of the family here, as support, but that whole move and the stress around it is what really sent me to what I would say was my low point, that I then said, okay, I gotta do something about this and be better. And so yeah, I was able, I think, to integrate that stuff, let's say 90 to 95% of the way. But as time went on, and I wasn't reminding myself of those things, and I was successfully living my life, and things were better than they ever had been. I started to have the feeling that I'm doing this more for other people than I'm actually doing it for myself. I'm doing this because this is what is expected of me, versus this is what I actually want to be doing. And which means to me now, the way I see it is, I still was obviously assigning some value to alcohol, thinking that it was going to improve my life in some way, that adding it back in responsibly would make my life even better. And so yeah, I think that maybe those teachings and those lessons were fully integrated at first, but just little by little, without any accountability or sticking with it, they started to slip away, and the old temptations and desires started to creep back in, to the point where, it was a very thoughtful reintroduction into my life. It was something I talked to my wife about. We actually talked to her therapist about the best way to go about it. And, and it was fine for a few weeks, but then kind of slowly, and then all at once, I was back where I had been and not living the life I wanted to live.
So, when we stop drinking, it is so important to understand our why. And like you, I also would stop for other people, and I still had that cognitive dissonance. I know that I should be living this alcohol-free life, and alcohol still holds value. I still view it as something that I would really like to have in my life. And that sets up that's not a great setup for sustainable success. It might work for a period of time, but still seen as something that holds value ultimately means that we have a sense of living in deprivation. And humans are pleasure-seeking creatures. Living in deprivation brings up some feelings, and eventually it's likely that we're going to scratch the itch.
Yeah, that's well said. I think that, like I said, that perfectly describes the point I got to, probably 3 years into that span, where, yeah, it did seem like, okay, I've got control of this, and it can be an additive thing in my life again.
What have you learned? We focus a lot on the science, as you know. What have you learned about that? About why, when you went back within a matter of weeks, you were at the same point you'd been before you ever stopped?
I think one of the most impactful lessons I learned in this program, I've referenced it a few times, and I don't remember exactly which call it was or how it got in my head, but it's one of those things that stuck there, and I still think about it. And that was how all of us are obviously genetically differently, but there are some of us, and I have a perfect example with my wife, some of us who alcohol affects serotonin receptors more. And so she's very capable of having one or two drinks, and even the second one sometimes just saying, I don't want any more of this. I'm kind of starting to feel a little bit sleepy. Whereas for me, the reintroduction of it, just immediately, it was like stomping the gas on that flood of dopamine again. And so I think, like, just very rationally, scientifically, that's the way that I would describe it. That's what's going to happen based on the way that I am. If I have that in my life, it's the classic one is too many and 10 is not enough. And I think I fit that profile. And that was nothing, or that lesson is not something that I had ever really learned before. Despite understanding, okay, obviously alcohol does affect the brain this way, and it does these things, but just that juxtaposition of two different kinds of people. And I was able to relate that to something earlier in my life, like 17 years ago now. I found out that I was having some stomach problems, and I went to doctor, and he's like, well, why don't you give up gluten for a while and see if you feel better? So I did, and I almost immediately felt better. And so that was an easy association to make. Now it wasn't an easy thing to give up, especially then, because it was very hard to go out or go to the grocery and find things that were gluten free. Now it's much easier. And it's kind of weird, the similarities between giving up alcohol and that, because with that lesson, I was able to make the connection in my mind. This is just something that's not good for me, much like this other thing I removed from my life and felt better. And much like gluten, it's interesting that it seems like, and maybe it's just because my eyes are open to it, but I'm noticing more and more people are going this way, and there's more and more alcohol-free alternatives available. There's even a gluten-free, alcohol-free beer that Athletic Brewing Company makes that I see everywhere. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's like I'm evolving into the way that the world has gone.
I get that. I also went gluten-free close to 2 years ago. After all my chemotherapy and everything, my gut has never been the same. And so I don't know if it's celiac, but I've got autoimmune stuff. So it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck. And so gluten was making me miserable. And it was funny, Jeremy, I went through some of the same stages that I went through with alcohol. I thought, well, okay, I'll just have a little bit of gluten. I'll only have gluten at a birthday party. I'll only have gluten when I go to a really great Italian restaurant. And I caught myself and I thought, oh my gosh, Victoria, you're doing all the rationalization and everything, because gluten held value to me because it tasted so good. And then I got to the point like you described where even a little bit made me so miserable that the fear of living a gluten-free life was less scary than the idea of continuing to eat gluten and just suffer. So isn't it funny how our minds work? And here's a question for you, and we've talked about this on calls as well. When someone gives up gluten or gives up dairy, there's no real emotion attached to it. And it certainly doesn't create any kind of angst in a social situation. You might not be able to eat as many things. I certainly go and look at buffets sometimes and go, well, that would be nice. But no one's coming up to you, Jeremy, and saying, oh man, you're going to eat gluten with me on my birthday, aren't you? I mean, what about the class reunion? You're going to have gluten there, right? So isn't it funny how
Right.
the emotion and the stigma ties into it, even though, like you said, when you look at it scientifically, it's just how we are wired. You and I don't tolerate gluten, and we don't tolerate alcohol very well. It does bad things for us.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Although I would take it in a slightly different direction. And it could be because when I first stopped with the gluten, it wasn't as much of a thing. Like, you definitely didn't see a gluten-free section in the grocery store, or, items noted that on the menu. It felt to me at that time like there almost was a stigma around it. Like I was different.
Yeah.
I was like weird from the way that most people are. And so in a way, you're right. It's not like someone is pressuring you to have a piece of birthday cake at a birthday party, but inside there's a similar feeling of, I'm different from this other group that's enjoying this thing, and I don't like the way that feels.
That is interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, because you're right. People, I had a few friends who gave up gluten, and I thought, oh, you're being kind of pick me, like, oh, there's the gluten-free person. So
Yeah.
You're right. It has evolved. That gluten-free lifestyle, because more and more people are just noticing that, wow, I just don't feel that great. And so you were a trailblazer in that in that field. Yeah, and I am glad we have a lot of gluten-free options now. And look at how the alcohol movement has followed suit. Do you find that it is becoming more normalized to choose something besides alcohol?
It seems that way to me, and I don't know if probably part of that is attributable to that effect of, once you notice something, you notice more of it. But I think I definitely am more aware of those options, and people in my age demographic particularly, I notice, are either giving up drinking entirely or drinking less and less. I think of people in my family. I think of folks who are in my friend circle. We had a gathering at our house on Friday night, and it wasn't like there was some big announcement that there wasn't going to be drinking, but I think there were 2 folks at the gathering who drank a little bit of wine, but the rest of us didn't, and there was no discussion about it. That was just the way that it was. So yeah, and maybe part of that's attributable to what I'm doing and the influence maybe I have, because I used to be the one pouring gas on the fire, and not doing that anymore. But yeah, and I really hope to continue to attract more of those kind of friends and acquaintances. Like James said in some of those early videos in the P90 journey, you just, by choosing to do this and doing it genuinely and confidently, it's just going to happen that more of those folks are going to come into your life. And you're gonna be a part
Absolutely.
of more of those kind of events.
Yes, that does happen, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Because we do start to attract like-minded individuals. I think that when folks come into Project 90 and meet people, even though we're not meeting in person, they feel connected. It's not just, oh, you drank too much too. You are. A lot of us are cut from a similar cloth, and that feels safe and comfortable and liberating. So it only makes sense that we would then attract that in the real world, the world outside of our time together. Mm-hmm. So you went back, didn't go as planned, and you said, all righty, let me do something else. So the lone wolf starts seeking solutions, and You mentioned this is a full circle moment to be a guest on the podcast. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So I think it was, if my memory serves, it was sometime in March and I remember I woke up and of course didn't feel good because I'd been drinking the night before. And, I should mention too, I don't know how many folks this applies to, but I was being dishonest about it. I was hiding drinking because I was trying to pretend like I was living one way. I was actually living another way. And so that was a whole other layer of, disgust and shame with myself, not being truthful with my wife in particular. So anyway, I'm laying there in bed on a Saturday or Sunday morning with all these feelings. And I just thought, okay, I gotta find some kind of support group. I gotta start filling my head with the good knowledge and the good messages again. And I opened up the podcast app on my phone and I just typed in alcohol free. And, those are the first two words of the podcast. And so it was the first one that came up. I hadn't heard of it before, but I had heard James's name, and it may have been because I'm a big sports fan and he was, Sports Center anchor, but somewhere I had seen it seemed familiar. I was like, I'm aware of this guy. And so, listened to a few episodes that, I just scrolled through and looked at the subjects of the episodes. And it really landed with me because of the way that James and the whole program approaches this lifestyle of it's an additive thing. It's not a subtraction thing. It's a confident way to live. There's no stigma around what was going on. There's no, I'm defective and this thing has control over me. It was just a very empowering, new approach to dealing with it. So I saved the podcast and I would listen to a few here and there. I didn't make the decision right away. But everything came to a head. I think it was in mid to late April, made what in hindsight were some stupid decisions, but at the time seemed like the only decisions I could make because I was not operating at full capacity. And it really came down to the point where, I can't believe this, but my marriage is in trouble. My wife doesn't trust me. What do I have to lose here? I've got to do something different. And I need to do something to show her that I'm not just trying the same old things again. And that's when I went on the website and took the questionnaire and signed up for an intro call. And, my wife and I both were actually on the call with Adam, when we talked about really getting in the program, and, just took the leap that day with her and his encouragement and, really haven't looked back.
That really shows your true character. Alcohol takes us out of integrity with ourselves, and then that spills over into our relationships. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you and your wife, this was you attempting moderation was a joint decision. It's not like you just decided one day watching a game that, I'm gonna have a drink. It was a thoughtful conversation. You consulted with a therapist, and I can only imagine what it must have felt like when you knew that you were going down a slippery slope. And how do you tell her?
Yeah. Well, and there was a lot of shame around it too, which I don't feel now, but then I did, because I was so confident and I got this and, I can do it and I'm stronger than this thing. And now I realize that was the wrong way to look at it altogether. But yeah, I felt really defeated, and really down with all of it for a while there.
Not truly understanding the science and how the wiring is there. We don't change our pathways. We build new pathways. And so you being alcohol free was great. Your life got better, but were you really building a life of your design, a life that you really, really felt like you were filling your cup? And so, yeah, it makes sense. And then you find yourself on that slippery slope after feeling like this was a team effort. And then, here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember conversations I had with her and with others just saying, hey, I realize where it had gotten to before, and look at all I've gained in these 3 years, career wise, health wise, just goal wise, and no way I'm going to let that happen again. And so when it did, it was just like, I didn't know, I couldn't process it.
It's a lot to take on. It was very difficult. Yes. I've been there more than a few times. Like, wait, what the heck? How did I get back down here? It's like the game of chutes and ladders. You're going up, you're climbing the ladders, and then all of a sudden you're down at the bottom. You're going, hold on a second. Yeah, totally. Well, Jeremy, I'm glad that you heard our podcast and that you joined us. I love that your wife was on the call with Adam. Adam is one of our enrollers, great guy. And that you, again, made this a team effort. I think that's wonderful. So you came in, and I remember when you did, and you were definitely ready. You were ready to do this. And like I said, you were extremely coachable. So I have looked into what does it mean to be coachable? And I think this describes you. The definition of coachable is one is ready to do what it takes to change, transform, improve, or excel, whatever that means for them and their situation. So that was you.
Yeah.
You came in, you had, you're confident in lots of areas of your life. You realized you were lacking some skills and some tactics in this one. You came in with a really, really open mind. As you know, with your onboarding call, you were told about what's on our side of the commitment and what we ask of you on your side, meaning coaching calls, Marco Polos, and the most important part, opening up and being very honest and vulnerable. Can you describe a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, I think so. As you were setting that up, I was kind of thinking back. What is it about me that makes me coachable in this way? And I think your definition was perfect. Just really ready to accept advice and expertise in order to get to a more desirable place. So I'll use my career as an example. I never intended to do what I'm doing, and maybe we want to talk more about this later too, but I'm actually going to do something else. But anyway, to get to the point I've gotten to, I didn't really study this in school. I kind of fell into it. And so from the outset, I had to listen to people who were smarter than I was and had more experience than me. And that's, I think more than anything, that's what's made me successful both in life and in my career, is being able to reach out to folks who know better and take their advice, apply it to myself, kind of distill it down to its core parts, and use that to kind of like get up to the next handhold. And so that's been very similar here. And so, starting out, I thought, okay, well, the Zoom coaching calls, that makes total sense. I'm into that. I can get on a meeting and participate and listen and take notes. I feel like one of the other legs of the stool of this program is the daily 20 gratitude every day. That made sense to me. It's like working out a muscle. But then there was this Marco Polo thing where the guidance was basically, hey, get on there. I think it's 4 times a week and share how you're feeling. Don't just talk about the weather or how your favorite team is doing, but really talk about yourself and what you're going through and encourage others. And I'm allergic to social media and the look at me. Look at all these pictures of my family and here's how great I am. And so that was hard for me to lean into, but it didn't take very long of doing it. And again, back to your point, it was like, I paid this money. You guys told me to do it. So This is what I'm going to do. It's worked for others. And very quickly, with the guidance of others, who were farther along in the 90 days than I was, who kind of showed the way and set an example of how to do it. It just started to get easier and easier to get on there and listen to how folks were doing, respond to them, share challenges in my own life, and really having that pod, that community on those polos was such a larger part of this for me than I ever would have dreamed that it was. And don't get me wrong, but I mean, I learned things on the calls that I referenced earlier that have been monumental in this perspective shift. But, yeah, that group of people that was constant, but always evolving as new folks came in and older folks who had been in the program longer left, it was that daily, every morning I fired it up and checked in. It was like checking in with my favorite baseball team in a way every day. How's everybody doing? So yeah, that's kind of a rambling way, but to answer the question, but hopefully that answers the question you asked.
It absolutely answers the question. I think it really illustrates a few things. First of all, yes, many of us feel that way about social media. We're so tired of curated content and, these snapshots that people post and pretend that that's the whole story. There's definitely a lot of fatigue around that. And I like to think of Marco Polo as the antithesis of social media. And so, it is a come as you are. In fact, if I see someone who is getting all fixed up and curating their content, that's a sign for me to reach out and poke the bear a little bit and say, let's talk about what's really going on. Your hair looks great and it doesn't matter here. To the point, maybe you've seen it where I'll post a polo, I'm a mess, no makeup or anything. And I'm like, hey, this is life. We're all human. I want to know how you are really. And there's such a genuine caring in our community around that. Because like you said, you wake up and you fire up the Marco Polos because you really do want to see how everyone's doing. Yeah.
And it's gotten to a point with me. I don't know if this is just, I've got a little bit of a perfectionist nature, but, once I got into the pod and really got into it a few days into the program, it didn't matter. There were times where I had no reception. I was like off in the woods and I'd missed 3 or 4 days, and I'd get back and it's like, this is what I'm doing on my commute until I catch up. I got to see every one of these. And I'm the same way in Beyond 90 now. If I miss a few days, I don't just jump in. I'm like, I want to know how these folks are doing, because there's nuggets of knowledge and experience and a place to maybe jump in and share something that's been helpful to me in every single one of those. And I don't want to miss
such a great attitude. So. You do. You really want to enjoy the entire experience of life on the other side of alcohol. And yeah, it's funny because, again, we do work with successful people, and not a single one of them got there without mentors, inspiration, right? Continuing to grow and hone their skills and expand their skill sets, things like that. We just finished the Olympics, and these people train constantly. They're always striving to hone and improve. And they have coaches. So when you look at those sorts of individuals, you can certainly say, what can I learn from their mindset? And I'm so glad that you came into this alcohol-free journey with that same attitude. And because it is different when it's alcohol. There can be some feelings, some shame, like, oh, how did I get all the way down here? Now I got to pay money and show up and talk to these strangers. But if you're open and curious, that's where the magic is. And that's what you've been and continue to be in Beyond 90. Yeah. We'll talk about 2 more things. First, what What are some of the greatest benefits that you experienced within those first 90 days?
I think, well, the number one greatest benefit is removing, and I don't want to say 100%, because it's all, I think there's always going to be an aspect of it that's a work in progress, but removing value from alcohol. And so I went to a concert last night with my family. It was great. Went and saw Sierra Farrell at the Woodland Park Zoo. And, you know, it wasn't like a big party kind of concert, folk music. But that would have been an environment where, let's say 2 years ago, if I was there, I would have felt like I was missing out on something by not being on the blanket drinking. And last night, there was no part of me that had any temptation of, I could stop here and get something nobody would know. Just not a desire. And so alcohol losing all value in my life, let's say, has been the number one thing. And without that, I think that's like the cornerstone of it. You cannot assign any value to this thing. Otherwise, there's always going to be that voice in your head saying, okay, how could we fit this in? How might this work? From that, one of the things that I've realized is just not feeling fantastic every day, because everybody sleeps bad every now and then, or we get sick, but by and large, feeling physically and mentally like the best version of myself. And so to me, that's like another building block of, I would never want to sacrifice the way that I feel physically and some of the things that I'm achieving now and the hobbies and activities that I love to do. I would not want to sacrifice the mental clarity that I notice, that's hugely different from how it was 3 months ago. So I think those three things, the value being gone from that substance. I should mention too, just improvement in relationships, particularly within my immediate family, would be a huge one too. But so relationships, physical health, mental health, and just truly seeing how life is better in, you know, every aspect without dumping poison down my throat on a regular basis. And I think even seeing alcohol that way, you know, James has the attractively packaged poison. He should trademark that or copyright it. But it's true. It's a great way of looking at that substance. That's what it is. And so seeing it for what it is
indeed,
you know, it's a game changer.
Yeah, from the moment we wake up, whether we've had a great night of sleep or a restless night, to wake up and not, even before we open our eyes, not have that, holy cow, what did I do? To me, that's priceless. And that's before we open our eyes. How much, what is that alone worth? Waking up in the morning knowing that you're not in trouble with your wife. If you are, it's about something little. You didn't take out the garbage or whatever. You're not in trouble with your wife. You've not lied. You're not hiding things. Less irritable with your children. I know we follow some of your adventures. You're very active with your family. You love the outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
It's invaluable.
Yeah. Yeah. And all that's improved. I mean, I think back to a vacation we went on a few weeks ago. There's nothing about that, in hindsight that would have been any better doing it any other way. And, it's just continuing to stack those blocks. And, as we alluded to earlier, I mean, I come at this a little different because I sort of know, I know this to be true, but going through it this time with this mindset and, it's like the first time you do anything without that substance and you realize actually it's the thing I'm doing that's great, not the substance. It's just,
oh, for sure,
reinforcing those new pathways.
Yes, going to a concert. I remember going to a concert and not drinking, and I love live music. And I thought, wow, I'm alert and aware of every single song. I don't have to keep leaving to use the restroom because I'm not guzzling this stuff that makes me have to go. I'm not waiting in line at the bar and potentially missing the song while I'm in line waiting for my drink. Yeah, you get to really just enjoy the whole reason that we do these things, which is for pleasure. Yeah. So you graduated with flying colors, as I said. You're going to be a reference for me when you're on those B90 weekend calls and things like that. Because when you had your celebration call and people asked, what worked for you, you said, I kind of did what they told me to do, and it really worked out the way it was meant to. So, you weren't resisting. So that's going to help a lot of people. And I know it's going to help some of our listeners. And so you continued on to Beyond 90, which is our program that takes our members to 1 year alcohol free. It is not as alcohol centric, right? We're not usually a heartbeat away from picking up a drink. Nervous systems have begun to heal. Prefrontal cortex is rebuilding itself. You're thinking more clearly. Relationships are getting better. And it's really about, okay, Jeremy, you're a songwriter. You now get to write the song. Alcohol is no longer the composer. What are you excited about over these next 9 months?
I think, the number one thing I'm excited about is just continuing to be the husband and father that my wife and kids deserve. I mean, that's number one, always number one. An extension of that being the son, the cousin, the son-in-law, all of that, the friend, being the best version of myself for the people in my life, my community. Beyond that, I referenced this earlier. I'm really excited for what I'm going to do and what I'm looking at as the second half of my career. And I was fortunate enough to do what I did for the first half of my career that now allows me to go in a different direction. And I've always had, my parents were both teachers, and I've always had this idea in my head that that's something I'd really like to do, but it never seemed like it would be possible. I wasn't sure that the support would be there. I wasn't sure it was something, candidly, that financially I could swing. But the more I've learned, the more I've researched, the more I've talked to folks, and the more that my family's life has evolved to this point, my wife and I were out for our anniversary dinner, and we were talking about it, and she said, why don't you take this leap and just go do it? Because quite frankly, it's a total first world problem, but I'm not excited about what I'm doing day to day anymore. And so I'm excited to continue in that direction, to go back to school and get the degree that I need to go teach what I want. I'm completely changing what I'm doing. I'm not doing finance and accounting anymore. I'm going to go teach science to high schoolers. That's what I've always wanted to do. And so I can't wait to dive into that and get more involved in my community and all of that way. And, a huge aspect of that too, is taking it back to family again. The way I grew up, I treasure those experiences I had with my mom and dad and my brother, during Christmas break, during spring break, during summer break, when we would travel and spend time together and go on all these adventures that really helped shape me into the person that I am today. And to be able to create the space to do that with my own boys, and give them some of those same kind of experiences, it's what I'm looking forward to more than anything else. And so, yeah, I think that sums it up. I've got other milestones that I'm looking at that I know are possible now that wouldn't have been before. I want to be a single handicap golfer. And over this summer, I've gone from, I think, started out at 17 or 18 and I'm down to 14. All that has to do with is approaching the game the right way and being present and feeling good physically. So stuff like that. Everything has kind of a brighter, more possible hue to it now than it did before.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a lot.
It's a lot.
I'm looking forward to.
It really is a great example of what Beyond 90 is. It's a lot, and it's possible. It's definitely stretching, and you can totally do it. I think that once we topple the big domino of alcohol, and we're not just not drinking, we're living a life that feels free from alcohol instead of it nagging at us. Not to say that it doesn't pop up or whatever. It's not an overnight thing, but just it's amazing what that does for our confidence. And you are new to Beyond 90, but I'm sure you're already seeing the crazy things that people take on. They change careers, they learn to fly, they scuba dive, they volunteer in other parts of the world. It's fantastic. Isn't it exciting to watch?
It is, for sure. And I'll give a plug. I'm at the very start of B90, but the intro call, or kind of the introductory calls that were last week, orientation. Yeah, it was time perfect because I just came into the program, but I was thinking this is beyond what my expectations were. Pardon the pun. But I think that's going to be perfect as I navigate these changes I have out in front of me, to really be thinking about things the right way, really set goals and get after them in the right way, be accountable to that group that's there. And I feel lucky, we were joking before we started recording about me being maybe a little bit on the younger side of this program, but I look at that as a bonus too, because I get to gain the experience from folks who are more advanced in their careers and have more experience in life than I have. And so I look forward to their guidance and examples as I work through all these things as well.
Yeah, it is beyond. It's fun to be part of a pack. And I would say that the lone wolf has found his pack. And we're so glad that you're part of it. Well, listeners, I will bring Jeremy back when he hits 1 year so that we can follow up and see what kind of magic has happened in his life by his own creation with the support of the coaches and the invaluable community. I think that'll be fun. Maybe I'll have to call you Mr. Wilson and give you a shiny apple for your desk.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There'll be paper wads being thrown at my head on this next call. It won't be just a sterile office like this.
So fun and exciting. Well, thank you, Jeremy. For our listeners, maybe this is the episode. Maybe this is the one that resonates. As Jeremy mentioned, he came to us through the podcast, and maybe you will too. You can book that discovery call. It's 15 minutes. It's free, and it's a conversation. We might be the fit for you. Maybe we aren't. We can share other resources. That the important thing is to break that inertia, to take that step forward. And as I mentioned with Jeremy, just be curious. What might be possible? Might be with us, might not, but pick up that phone and make that call. Could be a turning point. Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks for listening. Until next time, take good care. Have an awesome day.